You're listening to The Reforming Nerddom, Conversations by Stormlight with Nate and Ben.
Well, welcome everybody. We are Reforming Nerddom. I'm Ben. Nate is over here across the table from me. This is something a little bit different, a little bit new compared to what we normally do, what you may have heard from us in the past. But this is Conversations by Stormlight. So Nate and I are going to be walking you all through our journey through the Stormlight archive. Specifically, right now we're looking at the first book, The Way of Kings, which we both have now finished.
Yep.
And we want to kind of just introduce you to the book and why we think it's worth you reading as well. So Nate, why don't you introduce yourself, and then we'll kind of talk about why we're doing this.
Sure. So for those of you who listen to the podcast, the kind of flagship podcast, I'm Pastor Nate Wright, and I'm one of the hosts of the show. And so really this started actually, we have a lot of people in our lives, right? Our associate pastor here at the church, Chris, obviously Jordan, who is our co-host on the podcast. A lot of the people, young guys in our church, started reading the Stormlight archive. And for a long time, Ben and I were just kind of like, guys, each book is 1,200 to 1,400 pages. There's 5 of them. I have no time for this. And we both enjoy fantasy, but I wouldn't say that fantasy is like our favorite. Like we're Narnia and Lord of the Rings fans, but like neither of us are avid fantasy readers.
I've read the only other sort of non-Tolkien or Lewis fantasy series I've read is The Wheel of Time.
Yeah,
which I did get through,
and I liked,
which was fine. But yeah, so it's been a long time. I mean, that was a good.
I also
probably 15 years ago.
Like full nerd transparency. I also read several Magic the Gathering books back in the day.
Good for
when
you.
I was in like grade school. But So, but then we had Joshua Hames, who's the host of Reformation Red Pill. And he was on, and he kind of pitched why he thought Stormlight Archives is a good investment.
He Way of Kings red pilled.
That's right. That's right. And so it was at that time, and I just happened to be, this was back in December, I think, and I just happened to be heading out on a speaking engagement out west. So I had 7-hour flights to and from with a bunch of driving, and I was like, you know what? I'm just going to get the audiobook and see if I like it. Yeah. And by the time I got back from that trip, I was about 20 hours in to an audiobook, which FYI
so
is
15% of the way into the book.
Yeah, exactly. But I really liked it. And so I convinced you to read it. And we kind of thought, this is not just a book that's worth investing in, but it's also because we're doing this Reforming Nerddom project, we thought this would be a cool way to get some extra content. And so we got into it, and spoiler, we're both through the first book, through the second book, and so we're kind of wanting to walk through this, and we're gonna commit to reading all 5. We're not going to commit to reading all Sanderson stuff from the Cosmere because that's crazy, but we are going to read this series and just kind of walk our way through it because we do think this is actually worth investing in. So why don't we talk maybe a little bit about why we think this book is worth, or this series is worth investing your time in, because it is a decent amount of time investment.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, and that was my biggest initial sort of drawback or setback to getting into it. We knew, like you said, a ton of people that either were reading it or had read it, and everyone had good things to say about it. Yeah. And so, it was Hames that eventually kind of got us into it. So, what I have found the benefit in reading it has been twofold. I'd say first, it's that community, right?
Yeah.
It's
for sure
knowing so many people that are that could be true for not just The Way of Kings, right? Yeah. Whatever, I would say, if there's a book, if there's a series that 40% of the men in your church are reading, like, read it.
Yeah,
you're gonna totally. Like that is a worthwhile endeavor in almost any case, whatever the book is. For our church, for whatever reason, this is the book, this is the series, and so it creates fun, interesting conversations. We all get the same references now, which I was totally out of the loop of for a long time.
But when people are talking about shard blades and shard plate and how storming mad they are.
Storm this.
But no, I think that's a good point because it's interesting. And I remember a number of years ago, like, or maybe even like 6 years ago, Colleen and I were like, you know what, we should try rewatching Lost. And we got a few episodes in and just couldn't really get into rewatching Lost. And part of the thing, like, it's a great series. I love the first like 3 seasons of Lost was fantastic. But I think part of what was so great about it, like, I watched it when it was actually on TV.
Right.
And it was like you're waiting a week for the next episode and everybody's kind of talking about it and what's going on, and people are speculating about what's the smoke monster and what, you know, what's the Dharma Initiative and all this kind of stuff.
Turns
and
out that all of it was nothing.
yeah, turns out they didn't have good answers for anything. But
all the theories were great.
But the theories and the conversations that it sparked, and that I mean, that series really did bring up a whole lot of, like, whether it's daddy issues or like there's just a lot of like good conversation to be had about it. And I find that's the same with this book is even just some of the conversations you and I have had about, you know, character and integrity and some of the things that have happened in the book already. It's worthwhile. But everything is always more worthwhile when you're doing it within the context of like koinonia and like, you know, Christian fellowship.
Totally.
So.
I mean, we're literally sitting in a room right now with a weirdly freak hailstorm happening outside. And
a high storm
now, exactly. And now I get it. And I'm just like, oh, this is like obviously a high storm with creme falling, you know, plinking against the windows and
Hail sprinter.
Which all of which I would have thought was insanely stupid a couple months ago, but now I get it and it's fun. And so that's one benefit. And I think the other benefit, which you just sort of started segued into, is just there is actually a lot of good like masculine kind of traits in the characters. There are characters that are good, you know, that characters you want to emulate. Characters you don't want to emulate. But yeah, so it just actually creates good, like it's not just silly conversation.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, like Adolin, you know, like we're in the second book now. So, you know, it's like Adolin becomes a real important character. And so you know, you kind of look at him and the brave and courageous things that he does, and it's like inspiring. And you're, you know, sitting on the couch watching TV, and you're just like, oh man, like Adolin would not be doing this right now.
Seriously, you think Dalinar would be doom scrolling right now?
So it's good. And I think those are the two kind of my main pitches to you to read this book, this series is. Especially if either there are already people within your community who are reading it, or you could convince people in your community to read it with you, and then convince them because it's actually a good book with good characters and good plot. And
there's some. I would also say like the world itself that Sanderson's created is actually pretty interesting and cool. There's stuff about it. We were just talking before we fired up the microphones. There's some stuff in it that kind of gets a little annoying, and there's some stuff that we like and don't like about it, and we'll talk about all of it. But I do think it's worthwhile even just immersing yourself in the world a little bit, because there's some cool stuff. Like even the idea that the name Stormlight comes from sort of, you know, the currency really of that world. It's the fuel for the magic source. It's the fuel for the economy. It's the fuel for everything. And it comes through these like very devastating, very like damaging high storms, which is just an interesting thing that you have to wait for this thing that everybody is afraid of, but it's actually what fuels your power sources and your magic and your economy and everything. There's just some very interesting stuff that you could delve fairly deeply into if you wanted to. So there's some cool stuff with that as well. And I agree with you. I just think the character arcs are very, very good. Sanderson is obviously, he's not a Christian guy. He's a Mormon guy, but there's a sort of religious ethic. And we'll talk a little bit about even the religion within it that we're not super fond of, but the idea just of like masculine, like they're even within a world where there are masculine arts and feminine arts. There's masculine food, feminine.
Roles of men and women, and
which I actually find very refreshing, because so much of what you read now is super woke, and it'll be interesting to see, because we hear that the trajectory of this series gets, you know, a little bit more woke as we go on, but we'll be able to talk through that stuff. So,
which is also why we probably are stopping at book 5.
Yeah, exactly.
And, you know,
but we'll go from there.
We'll get there. Yeah. So that's why you should read the book. Why should you listen to us talk about the book?
Great question. Because you're here. Remember Seinfeld was like, why am I watching it? Because it's on TV. Not yet, it's not. Well, here's the thing. Number one, we would encourage you. It's always fun to, like we said, to go through this stuff in community. And maybe you don't have a bunch of people around you who have read Sanderson, and so you're not going to get these kinds of conversations. So we would say, number one, the growing Discord channel that we have that's associated with our patrons, a lot of them are Stormlight fans. A few of them have just wanted to get into it because of some of the things that we've talked about. So this is a way for them to kind of read along with us and for us to spark some conversation that we think, this is the benefit of reading good books, whether you're reading the Iliad or Pride and Prejudice or The Way of Kings. The good thing about reading good stories is the ability to talk about it, apply things, delve into the characters. So we're going to do all that stuff. But we also want to, the kind of the overarching project of reforming nerddom is to think Christianly about these things. So we want to help you, like, how do you extract benefit from investing 44 hours of time into book 1 of 5 in this? And
that's on like 1.5 speed.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So we do want to help you see the benefit of these things. And I think we're going to look at it, rather than just kind of going through it like chapter summaries, we're going to do that a little bit today just with the prelude and the prologue. But we're going to look at story arcs. So we're going to look at individuals within the story itself. We're going to look at Kaladin and Shallan and Dalinar, and we're going to talk about their story arc within the entirety of the book, just so you can help see, again, extracting some Christian virtues, maybe talking about some areas of character flaw. So we hope they'll be beneficial spiritually to you, but we'll also hope that they'll be entertaining to you, and anybody who's a fan of the book itself and has read it before, we think just talking about it and hearing other people talk about it will be fun for you.
Nice. So how this is going to work then, for those of you who are listening, if you're listening to this right now, this is out on our general kind of feed, available for everyone, patron, non-patron, whatever, whoever you are. But going forward, the rest of the episodes are going to be released to our patrons only, to those on our Discord channel in particular. There likely will be a day at some point in the future when all of them get released to all of the unwashed masses. But so this episode, there is going to be, the only thing we're going to spoil is the prelude and the prologue. So if you're listening to this and you're like, oh, this is something I'd like to get into, the only thing we're going to spoil this episode is the prelude and the prologue. So I think keep listening. I don't think that's something that's going to ruin your experience of reading the book. But after that, every episode is going to be complete spoilers of the entire book, because we are going to do complete start to finish story arcs of each character, how they start, how they end. So my recommendation would be, if you haven't read the book, listen to this episode. Hopefully this kind of sparks your interest to read the book. Then put a pause on listening to the rest of the episodes until you finish the book, and then come back and listen to each episode. And if you've already read the book, then just listen as we go. Yeah.
And one of the things we do want to, obviously, we're trying to grow something here, and we're trying to, if you listen to our main show episode a couple weeks ago, we kind of talked about our plan for taking over nerddom. And so we would really encourage you, like, go to patreon.com/reformingnerddom. Take a look at the membership options there. Investing in Christian media that you like is actually how you get more of it. And so we want to be able to do more shows like this. But that Patreon, Discord community that is growing. It's a lot of fun. There's a lot of people who are really enjoying that community. That is a place where we're doing this episode because of how many of those people have gone through the Stormlight archives.
100%. Right?
We're doing it for that community. So if you want to be a part of that community that's sort of directing some of the content that you'd like to see in something like Reforming Nerddom, then we would just say join. And you can join for as little as $3.50 Canadian a month, which is like $1 American or something like that. And there's different levels, obviously.
It's like the price of 2 eggs in America.
Right. Exactly. There you go. But we would just encourage you. We are doing it for that community. It is a growing community. It's a lot of fun. We're enjoying ourselves. It seems like people are seeing some benefit from it. So we would encourage you, if you can just wait until it's all becomes free for everybody. But we would really encourage you, come support what we're doing, but be part of the community that'll be talking about these things while it's going on.
Yeah. Which is just way more fun.
Way more
so yeah, and like we understand, we are a couple of guys who are coming to this series over a decade. I don't know what it is, 15, 20 years, whatever it is, kind of late to the party.
After it was written, yeah.
And so, yeah, we understand that there's a lot of people, right? Like some of you guys are Stormlight archive experts, and you're probably going to listen to us. And
actually, the Kremlings are.
But like that's part of the fun, right?
Yeah.
Come on, make fun of us, tell us how stupid we're being, and all the things that we don't get and don't understand. So that's part of the fun. Come on and do that. Maybe we'll even invite some of you on at some point to talk about it with us eventually too. So
yeah, and if there are patrons and Discord members who listen to this, and you have some unique take, or there's some character that you think is underappreciated, or some interlude that we didn't see the benefit of because we might not even talk about the interludes
because I may or may not have skipped a couple of them,
then reach out to us, because those are the kind of cool nerdy episodes that we want to do as well.
Yeah.
All right, do we want to talk about these first couple chapters?
Yep. Let's do the prelude and let's do the prologue and talk about that before we say goodbye.
Yeah. So the prelude itself is, I found it a very, very interesting little chapter, but you're totally lost. You don't understand what's going on when you first hear it. And there's little bits and pieces that you get throughout. It really doesn't actually start to materialize until early on in book 3, which I'm just right there.
Yeah. It's the end of book 2 where I started to even understand any of what happens here in the prologue. So when we say we're not spoiling anything, like you're not even going to get it.
Yeah.
Don't worry about it.
Yeah. So what happens in the prelude is you're kind of it starts kind of in media res, right? It's in the middle of this battle that's just winding down, and you're getting the point of view of a character named Kalek, who you find out is one of 10 heralds.
Which means nothing to
you at this point. Yeah. You don't know what a herald is. You don't know why there's 10 of them, and you don't know where he is. Is this Earth? Is this some other place? But he is in the middle of a battle, and there's a bunch of dead humans, and there's a bunch of dead creatures that aren't really explained. They're just called beasts and creatures. And so it seems like the battle is coming to an end, that his side has won, but he's traveling to the herald's kind of destination
meeting
spot.
place,
like that clearly after the battle there was some sort of meeting place that they were all supposed to go, these 10, for anybody,
like an online chat room that they were going to meet up in after.
Here's the Zoom link. And he keeps talking about how this meeting place is this rocky spire for everyone who survived the desolation. You don't know what that is, but there's 10 heralds, you don't know what they are, and they survived this war which was called a desolation, which you also don't know about. He arrives at the meeting spot, and he finds the leader of these heralds, whose name is Jezrien. So Kalek comes and he meets Jezrien, and Jezrien's there waiting for him. And at first, Kalek assumes that the other 8 of the 10 must have died, because it was a pretty furious, pretty ferocious battle. But he notices that there are 7 honor blades. Again, you don't know what that is, but you do
sort of weapon,
that there's some sort of weapon or sword. And they've been driven down into the ground at the base of this spire. Sort of like there's this rock, and a bunch of swords are driven down into them.
A bunch of King Arthur,
style.
Sword in the Stone.
Right. Yeah, it's definitely got Sword in the Stone vibes. So what you find is that Kalek is talking about how at the end of these wars, these desolations, they go back to a place where there's torture, there's torment.
Place of nightmares.
Yeah, a place of nightmares, some place that he doesn't want to go to. And he's kind of thinking to himself that he doesn't want to go back. And when he says that essentially to Jezreel, that he doesn't want to go back to that place of nightmares, Jezreel actually says that all of them feel
Funny
the same
you should
way.
say that.
Yeah, exactly. None of us actually want to go back. And he says that they're abandoning their oath pact. Again, we don't know what the oath pact is, but seemingly they're all supposed to go back to that place of nightmares where there's some sort of torment.
Wait
until they're summoned
desolation
again. Yeah. And we don't know how that comes about. We don't know anything about it. So Jezreel tells Kalek that he has to relinquish his blade. And he says, the oath pact is coming to an end. You have to relinquish your blade. So he puts his sword where all the other ones are. What you come to discover is that actually only one of the 10 heralds died during that particular war, a guy named Talinel. And he was the only herald who was killed during that battle, that he's going to go back as the sole, guy getting tormented.
Because when they die, they automatically
So either
back.
they choose to go back when they survive this desolation, or they go back automatically if they die during the battle.
How mad would you be?
Seriously. As you're the one guy who's got to go back to this place that these seemingly other 9 heroes, because it seems like they're all heroes and whatever, none of them want to go back to, and they're just going to abandon you. And I think he says near the end something along the lines of maybe it's enough if one of us is there. It's like, man, it sucks to be Talinel.
Maybe it's enough if one of us, not me per se, but one of us.
Yeah, exactly. So, so Kalek obviously seems pretty disturbed by the whole idea. There seems to be a lot of guilt. He's ridden with guilt. He knows he's doing something wrong, and yet his fear of that place of nightmares seems to be greater than his fear of doing the wrong thing here. And there's also allusion to the fact that they're betraying mankind, that people will call them, monsters, and people will call them, whatever. When he says that they're abandoning mankind, Jezreel kind of says, well, humanity still has the radiance. We don't know what a radiant is, but apparently they still have them. So there were heralds, there were radiants, and that's sort of what mankind had to protect them against these desolations, whatever those things are.
Yeah.
Finally, both Jezreel and Kalek summon their blades, which aren't just in their hands. They just come out of nowhere, which is kind of cool. And they both slam them into the ground along with the other 7. So there's 9 swords there. Obviously, Talinel, who went back to the place of nightmares, isn't there. And then Jezreel actually says Kalek has to go in an opposite direction, that none of them can be with one another. So they all have to abandon and walk wherever. Kalek kind of looks back at this circle of swords, and he looks at the one empty spot where the 10th sword should have been. And he kind of asks for forgiveness, whether he's talking to Talinel or humanity or both. That's sort of how this ends.
Yeah.
So
if you're lost and confused, we are over 2 books into it,
and we
still know about 50% of
the words used
what
in this
happened
prologue,
here, which is I'll admit, as you're getting into it, there is a learning curve in the first, I'd say probably 2 parts, like the first half.
Yep.
Of the Way of Kings, where you gotta get over the hump of being annoyed by not knowing anything.
Yeah, not knowing names, and races, and places.
Yeah. So that will take a bit of a learning curve, a bit of time for you to get used to all those things. But it's worth it. It's worth it.
And it is worth noting that the prelude, because we're going to move on to the prologue in just a minute, but the prelude takes place 4,500 years prior to the prologue.
This is a very
ancient
prelude. Yeah.
This is like
the lore of the whole
Yeah.
universe. Yeah. Not like this is like a prelude for the main characters.
Like
of this
Kalek
story.
doesn't show up in the story.
Yeah.
Like at least where we are.
Other than
books,
as a curse word.
Other than as a curse word, none of these heralds show up. And so, so this is really setting the lore, the mythology, the religion.
Yeah.
It's kind of setting, and by the time it opens up, it's almost like The Force Awakens, kind of like where when Rey asks Han Solo if like the Jedi and the Sith and everything, are they all real?
Yeah,
and he's like, the stories, they're real. They're all real. Yeah. It's that sort of thing where it's like, is it, right? Because you open up into the world, 4,500 years later in the prologue, and you come to find out this is sort of a mythology. This is sort of like, a religious, backstory. But
Right.
But super interesting, and it did catch my attention, even though I felt very lost. I just thought it was cool. I thought the writing was neat.
Yep.
And I thought it was I like mystery. I talked about Lost before, so I like these kinds of stories that are going to unfold something throughout time.
Yeah. So the difficult thing so what I would recommend is actually going back, maybe once you get halfway through the book, and reread that prologue. And then before you start book 2, reread that prologue from book, because like every time you read a significant amount more into the Stormlight archives,
you'll get more.
You just kind of get it more.
Totally.
And it's just really, every time you go back, you're like, oh, like that's the heralds. Like I didn't even remember that heralds were in that prologue.
Right.
I didn't even remember.
Even the idea of like, they talk about these honor blades, these swords. And as you get into the book, you'll be like, oh, like shard blades. And you're like, oh no, there's hundreds of shard blades. They're different. So the more you start to understand nuanced things, you'll catch more. But it's super cool. And I actually really like that. Again, I don't understand this prelude even now, 2 books in, but I understand a little bit of it enough that I'm like, oh, that was cool.
Yeah. So that was the prelude, which was good, but then there's the prologue,
which was awesome,
which was great.
Yeah. Awesome. Do you want to summarize, or do you want me to do it?
No, you keep going. You go ahead.
Okay. So, the prologue opens up, and it's 4,500 years later, and it's the point of view of a guy named Seth, and it's cool. Seth sent son Villano. He's called the Truthless of Shinovar, and you don't know anything about him other than he's a Parshendi. You don't really know what that means other than it's not human.
No, he's sent.
He's sent by the Parshendi.
Yeah.
He's a Shin.
Yeah. From Shinovar.
From Shinovar, yeah.
Again, you're not going to know.
Yeah, you're not
going to
know any of this. So yeah, he's a Shin assassin, and so it opens up, and there's this big festival going on, this big like celebration, and the celebration is a banquet to mark the peace pact between the Alethi and the Parshendi. So they've just signed a treaty that brings peace to their 2 kingdoms. And yet, Seth is an assassin hired by the Parshendi to kill the king of, his name is King Gavilar, who's the king of Alethkar. So, the Alethi, who are, the kingdom of Alethkar, the Alethi and the Parshendi are celebrating a truce that has been signed by both kingdoms. And yet, here's this assassin who's a Shin assassin hired by the Parshendi to kill King Gavilar. So, all of a sudden, and he even says, like, I don't understand why. I don't know why they want to kill the king. He's just this guy who's been sent, and he seems to be doing
my job.
Just doing my job. And he's so crazy cool.
Yeah.
So you learn that he begins to suck in Stormlight, breathe in Stormlight.
This is where you're introduced to Stormlight in the first place.
And so he notes that there's Stormlight being used to light hallways. It's in little money pouches on soldiers' arms or whatever.
These little orbs.
Yeah, so it's these orbs that house this Stormlight. You don't know where it comes from at this point or anything, but he's able to suck it in, and it's able to enhance his strength, enhance his speed. It makes him able to like walk on walls. It's called lashing. He lashes himself to the ceiling, lashes himself to the walls, lashes other people in different places. And the way it's just described is really neat, right? So he talks about like when he jumps and lashes himself to the ceiling, the way Sanderson describes it is that the ceiling becomes down
it actually
to him.
like reorients his whole like
perspective.
reality. Yeah.
Which is just kind of cool. So he uses these abilities, and basically what you come to find out is that he was hired to make a spectacle, to be seen, which is why he's in white clothing, right?
Yeah.
He's like, and he even jokes about how like an assassin wearing white, what a stupid thing, right? And so he's meant to make a spectacle. He's meant to kill a bunch of people, and he's meant to kill the king in a very public way. So he gets into the king's quarters, and a bunch of guards rush out at him, and he kills them and lashes them to the ceiling. He does this thing where he like sets the guy on the ceiling with a lashing, so he's stuck up there, and then he holds a spear, and the guy comes down and falls onto the spear. Like it's just a very cool, very action packed. And again, you don't really get it. Yeah. You don't understand what's happening, but it's still cool. You're like trying to grasp how he's using like this magic power.
Like Sanderson gives you enough real world information to understand enough what's going on, but not fully.
Right.
So you're filling in the blanks, and you're using your imagination. And again, you're going to get many chapters later and realize that, I mean, like I had in my mind when he was doing the lashings and stuff, I was like, Is he have like magnetic boots on or something? Like I just
because you're thinking of Magneto and like
so. And he's not.
Yeah, he is not a mutant. Yeah. He's just a Shin surge binder. Yeah, so he has these abilities. Other people don't. But what you do see is like he's made such a commotion, killed enough people, made enough noise that the king comes out of his chambers. And what you see is the king who's in sort of his robe, and he's surrounded by a bunch of guards, and they run off. And then his like bodyguard comes out. And he's described as a guy who's wearing shard plate and has a shard blade. So you learn as you're watching this that like Seth kills a few people with their own spears and stuff, but he has a sword that essentially can cut through anything like butter. And when he kills somebody with it, it smokes out their eyes, right? Yeah. Their eyes burn.
Doesn't actually physically it doesn't cut them in half. Yeah. But it
severs their soul is the language it uses, right? Which is why their eyes burn black, and it literally talks about how it like severs their soul, kills their soul inside their body kind of thing, which is just a cool thing. But seemingly this shard blade that this bodyguard has is like that. It's the same sort of weapon, but he also has shard plate. And even when they begin to fight, Seth is sort of like, he doesn't wear shard plate because he uses this magic for other things, right? So he's able to lash himself to the wall and jump around and stuff, whereas the other guy can't, but he has this like supernatural shard plate. And so anyway, he's trying to like kill this shard bearer, this bodyguard quickly so he can get to the king who's being taken away. And then you kind of get from Seth's perspective, he's like, wait a second. And he sees through the plot where it's like, oh no, the decoy, that king was a decoy. The king is actually this bodyguard.
Underneath the armor.
And so he fights this guy who you come to find out is King Gavilar. They have this big fight that cuts through walls and blows up doors and shatters, balconies. And at the end of it, they're fighting out on the balcony, and Seth like pulls the balcony down, and the king dies. And he falls down, and Seth is able to like softly land because of his superpowers. As the king is dying, as King Gavilar is dying, Seth tells him that he was sent by the Parshendi. The king is surprised and confused by that because again, this was supposed to be a banquet that's
celebrating the peace treaty.
Yep. And the king asks Seth to tell his brother, we don't know who his brother is at this point, but he says, tell my brother that, quote, he must find the most important words a man can say. And then he gives Seth a small glowing black orb, and then Gavilar dies. And so Seth, he actually, the Shin you find out, or whatever religion Seth is, they regard dying requests as sort of sacred. So he feels like he has to do this. So when Gavilar dies, Seth actually writes a message in Gavilar's own blood on a slab of wood before the dead body of the king.
Because he has nothing else to write with.
Right. And he's not going to stick around to tell, Gavilar's brother the message. So he writes out the message, to my brother.
Because he has too much honor to not fulfill this dying man's request.
Yeah, that's right. So all that to say, he writes the message, and then he discards the orb, right? Or he takes the orb with him. I can't actually remember.
I think he takes it, I don't
But I believe he
actually
discards
remember.
it. Yeah.
I
But
think-
it goes to show you we don't even know what that orb was. So here you go.
We're
Yeah.
still has not been revealed.
Yeah. So he writes out the message to Gavilar's brother.
I think I know the most important words a man
Do you? We should talk
should
about that once we
say,
turn
but
these off.
I'm not. I'm not
100% sure.
100% sure.
Yeah, it's so anyway, what we can say, because we've come into book 2, that I don't think is spoiling anything, is that this night actually becomes a very central theme.
Yes.
In terms of why did the Parshendi hire an assassin to kill Gavilar? It doesn't seem as though they actually.
It's almost like the linch. It is. It's the linchpin of like the whole story.
That's right.
And you're actually it's gonna come back and retell this night from different characters' perspectives, and it gives you a little bit more information every time it does that, and reveals more clues about who's doing what and why and all that kind of stuff. Yeah,
but we still don't know.
But
So what you learn in this is that there's different races. You see Parshmen, who are sort of the slaves of the Alethi.
Yeah.
You see the Alethi kingdom, which seems to be a powerful military kingdom.
Yeah.
You know the
Shin.
Parshendi,
who
are the ones who had the peace treaty with the Alethi. And you know of the Shin from Shinovar because the assassins won, but you don't know much about that other than that their religion is very different, because he's talking about like they would never make a castle out of stone. Stone is sacred. They would never use Stormlight for such common things as lights. Because it's sacred. So there's religious differences and all that kind of stuff. But you kind of get introduced into the world, and in this world there are things called shard blades and shard plate, which seems like the most powerful weapons in the world. And then you also have these powers, which only Seth has at this point that we don't know about, but pretty cool fighting sequence and lots of action and
and I
lots
think
of
Sanderson
mystery and intrigue.
I think one of the where a lot of authors, fantasy authors especially, can fail the most is in their action sequence writing.
Yeah.
And this is
the opposite.
Awesome.
Yeah. Well, I shouldn't say the opposite, because that seems to suggest he fails in other areas, but I would say it's a strength of Sanderson's. Like when you get to fighting sequences, they're the best parts of the book, I find.
Yeah. Again, I mean, like we mentioned, I was kind of skeptical about even getting into this whole Stormlight archive in the first place. And all it took for me was once I got through the prologue,
Seth
I was just
started
like,
killing people.
all right,
left, right, and
then.
center. Here we go. Yeah. It's pretty cool, and sets up and really, I mean, I mentioned Lost before, but I really do think like the book is almost, it has that sort of unfolding of mystery. There's more questions than answers. You slowly get answers to the questions, and the nice thing is that the answers that you get are satisfying.
Yeah,
right.
It does feel like this plot was figured out
prior,
before. It's not going back after the
trying
fact
to reverse
and being like,
engineer.
how am I going to make this thing that I left hanging work out? And it's like, no, I'm pretty sure he had
the whole
at
thing
least
mapped
like
out.
the first 5 books basically mapped out, which is thank
good.
you.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly. Like,
thank you for not doing Star Wars episode 7, 8, 9. Like
totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I do think
no Palpatine returns.
Yeah, yes. It's not just a bigger Death Star. I agree with that. I think that this is actually my favorite kind of writing, whether it's in TV or film or literature. I love that sort of
puzzle.
intrigue. Yeah, I love the puzzle. I love the stuff that seems weird because my favorite part is actually talking about my thoughts about it. And I will just say, 2 books in, 2 and a few chapters in, Sanderson has better answers than I have. Like the frustrating thing about Lost and other things like it is that what the fans came up with was better than what the writers came up with. Whereas I find everything with this, I'm like, oh, that's great.
That was clever.
Like, good job.
Yeah.
Like, so that's the world. That's the mystery. Why did King Gavilar die? Why did the Parshendi betray the Alethi?
Break their peace treaty.
Why did they hire Seth to do it? Who is Seth and why does he have these powers? What do the heralds have to do with any of this? And here we are.
Yeah. So this is the end. This is just that we're not going to reveal or spoil anything else for this episode. We want you to, if you haven't had a chance to read the book, go read the book, hit pause on listening to any more episodes until you've finished reading the book. But we would love to kind of be your guide through this journey through the Stormlight archives. So join us as we release these episodes. If you're not on Patreon, you need to go get on Patreon for a couple bucks a month. This is just one of a number of benefits that we want to give our Patreon subscribers. So pop on over
and join us in these conversations by Stormlight.
Oh, man.